Hi, everybody. Sorry, I wasn't on the right page. This is the next set of notes for our classroom management series. This is on communication. Oops. So, like always, there's some of these big ideas. First of all, we've already discussed how important relationships are with your students, with parents, with other teachers. We've discussed how these relationships affect classroom management, and that in order to have very good classroom management, you need to have good relationships with the people you work with. We're highly focused here on students, but you got to have a good relationship with them. Communication is the lifeblood of that relationship. And so if you don't know how or don't provide the opportunities to communicate with your students and allow them to communicate with you, those relationships are really going to struggle. So as a teacher, you're really concerned about three different groups for communication. You're worried about communication with students, you're worried about communication with parents, and then you're also worried about communication with other teachers. When there is a problem between two of these groups, the friction, you can most often relate that directly to poor communication. So anytime there's an issue, it's usually because things were not communicated well. For example, students that are often considered problem students, the ones that don't behave, that don't listen, that don't like school, when you pay attention to what they're hearing, they're often hearing very negative things at school. And those very negative comments just build up and build up and build up, and they don't hear a whole lot of positives. And so that's directly a communication problem. And that actually can affect a large number of your students if you're not careful. When a parent comes into you angry, 99% of the time they are angry because they only heard one side of the story, and that's their students. That's if there's been a problem. But even if they come in upset or unsure about something, 99% of the time, they've heard what their student has told them, and they have no idea what you're saying about it because they don't know how to get the communication from you. The last one is if you can't collaborate with teachers with whom you don't talk and with whom you never communicate. And so teachers, it's important that teachers work together, that they plan things together, that they work together, and you can't do that unless you communicate. And that's about the end we're going to talk about teachers. We're going to focus on parents and students from here on out. So with communication, of course, the channels of communication become really, really important. Question you should always have is, how many ways can a student get a hold of me? Of course, getting a hold of you in class is obvious and doesn't count. But are you available before or after school? Lots of teachers are, and lots of teachers aren't. But does a student know that if they have issues, if they have questions, if they need help, do they know that they can find you outside of class and when they can find you outside of class? This becomes a really important thing. Another one, which goes directly to how you talk to them, is, are you approachable? Do you encourage students? This kind of leads back to that students, often the poor students, hear much more negative than they hear positive. And so do the students trust you enough to come and talk to you when there's a problem? Or do they do as they have often in the past, which is just kind of deal with it and squeak by somehow? Being approachable, making sure that they know that you care about them becomes important here, because that opens up the channels of communication. Can your students email you? Can they text you or call you? Do you have connection with them on social media? Now, these are all interesting topics because, of course, younger students, none of these is going to apply. And it's pretty much left to, in class, are you approachable, and can they find you when they need you? But the older they get, the more opportunities these things have. Now, I do want to point out that there are teachers who do not want students to have their phone number. And that's fine. I mean, some teachers have had bad experiences with students, prank calling and things like that. I've never had that happen, but I've heard of it happening. And email, it depends on whether or not the student has email. In this day and age, email is really, really common, even in junior high. And so I would say any secondary student, whether or not they have your email can be a big deal. So can they email you if they need to? Now, I have a little asterisk by social media. And I want to explain that. Social media is an amazing communication tool, but social media can get a lot of people in trouble. I currently serve on the Wyoming PTSB board, which one of my jobs on that board is to discuss teachers who have done inappropriate things with students, who have crossed that line of teacher-student relationship and have made it something else. And almost always social media is involved. And so my gut reaction to social media is you best be careful, because if you're going to cross a line, it's going to happen with social media. And then that line gets farther and farther away. And then finally you find yourself in a very bad situation. But there are lots of ways to use social media in a very appropriate way with students. And one of those, for example, on Facebook, is to have a class Facebook page. So when we talk about social media, you should never share your personal social media accounts with your students, period, exclamation point, ever, underlined, exclamation point. Never, ever, ever should they have your personal social media. However, having classroom social media accounts, no matter what the social media might be, Twitter, Facebook, Google Plus, however that works, can be a really useful tool if the students use it. And so there is that asterisk there. Never personal, but a classroom one can be very handy. So real quick, because we haven't spent a lot of time talking with this, we've talked a lot about the student and teacher aspect of classroom management, and that's the importance of parents. So even though parents have very little to do with the day-to-day operations of your class, they actually affect the day-to-day operations of your class constantly. They're not there, but their influence is there. And so parents are really important in education. Good relationships with your parents will make or break your relationships with their student. Students generally will listen to their parents. Immediately when I say that, everyone's like, yeah, but what about the rebellious teenager? The rebellious teenager is still listening to their parents. They may not necessarily follow what their parents say. They may think their parents are stupid, but they're still listening. If a parent doesn't like you, their student will not like you. And if a parent likes you, even though that student has maybe had bad experiences with you, they will still give you second chances. And so relationships with parents become really, really important. Parent involvement in a child's education is a major contributor to that child's success. When parents pay attention to what the students do in school, they assist them at home, they encourage them at home, then the child does better, period. That's the way it works. However, you may be thinking, well, how does a teacher affect that? If the parents like you as a teacher and they communicate with you regularly, they know what's going on in school, then they are able to provide more assistance. Now, what can happen is the parents will make sure they're reading with the kids, they'll make sure they're doing their homework, but if the parent is not aware of what's going on in your class and how things work in your class and who you are and all these things about you, they're not sure they can help, and they may try and they may do it wrong, they may get frustrated. So your involvement with the parent increases the parent's opportunities to help their children at home, is the way it works. So some parents will help their children regardless of what you do and say, and some parents have a hard time with that, period. But your relationship a good relationship with you will encourage that parent's ability to help at home. Good relationships with parents also significantly decrease problems in your classroom. This is a purely classroom management idea. If the parents like you, if the students know that the parents are involved, if they know that you're communicating on a regular basis, the students act better. They will cause less I'm not speaking well. They will cause less disruptions in class. They will more quickly correct themselves if they do make disruptions, and it makes your life easier. And so communication with parents and making sure that they understand what's going on in your class and they know how you work as a teacher, all of these things do nothing but benefit you. And yet, even with all of that, the number one fear of teachers is talking to parents. And so first of all, we got to break that. We got to break the fact that teachers are scared to talk to parents. And it's uncomfortable sometimes. And I was a teacher for a long time. And I will tell you, I was also scared to talk to parents a lot of times. And so I found ways to do it that didn't make me talk to them directly, informing them in other ways. But teachers are often scared to talk to parents. They don't do it. They don't find the time to do it. And yet parents can be a huge help in your classroom. So, channels of communication part 2 with the parents. So parent communication is usually pretty one-sided. It's a lot of the teacher giving the parents information. So again, email, text, phone, these are pretty obvious, and teachers often will send this home with a note at the beginning of school. But remember, depending on how many kids they have, those parents are getting a lot. I have 5 kids. Each of my kids have several teachers. I'm getting 25 of those sheets. Every time they send them home, I'm getting 25 at once. Am I reading them all? No, because as a parent, I don't have time to do that either. And so even though it's really common, there's the classic things that teachers do to communicate with parents, and one of those is sending home handouts or instructions and things like that at the beginning of class. Parents get overwhelmed with that, especially if they have multiple children. And so do you know that they have your email, your text, your phone? How do you know that they have it? Just by you sending it home once doesn't mean that they have it. So the power of social media with informing parents. Now, social media is much easier to deal with when you're talking about parents. And there are a lot of teachers that are using it very effectively. But once again, this only works if your parents actually are using the social media. And so you got to kind of understand that. But social media is a great way to demonstrate and showcase student work. You put it on the social media, you say, oh, look at these students. They're doing such a great job. But the parents at home see it and they gush and they say great things to their students. They show them. And once again, then the student knows you're in contact with the parent sees the wonderful things their students are doing. Everybody's happy in this situation. It's a good way to inform them of class activities, messages, announcements, and even tips and helps. Many parents find Common Core math and English assignments to be very confusing because they are not formatted the way that the parents are used to. And so parents need to be taught how to help their children with these Common Core assignments. Facebook, social media are excellent ways of putting out demonstration videos, examples, things that parents can see and understand that they can actually help their children with these things. And they don't have to get frustrated and angry at the teacher because it's different from what they knew when they were growing up. So these are some of the very basic overview of communication, the need for communication, how you communicate. It's really important, again, as a teacher, to understand how you communicate with your students and the methods that you use to communicate with your parents. These things are the basis of your relationships with them. And so understanding them and using good communication methods is really quite vitally important. Again, you'll have the management research assignment due with this. I will attach the instructions to that as I usually do with the assignment in Blackboard. So if you have any questions, please do let me know. Otherwise, we will see you in class.